My journal has always been my sanctuary, the one place where I could spill out my wildest stories and unhinged fantasies without fear of judgment. That was until I found out that Eleanor, my mother-in-law, had been prying into its pages during her bi-weekly visits to our Brooklyn apartment. I couldn't figure out why she started giving me those strange, sideways glances during Sunday dinners, whispering to my husband, Ryan, just as I was bringing out dessert. "All right, everyone. Can anyone tell me why Daisy Buchanan from The Great Gatsby is seen as one of the most polarizing figures in American literature?" I gaze out at my sophomore English class, a sea of faces broadcasting the same silent plea. Why aren't we just scrolling through TikTok right now? I let out a soft sigh and deploy my secret weapon. What if we imagine Daisy as a kind of 1920s secret agent, trapped behind enemy lines of old money? Picture her, using her socialite status as a cover while secretly plotting to dismantle the corrupt system from within. A few pairs of eyes finally spark with interest. Success. The power of a good story never fails. It's the very reason I love my job at Walt Whitman High School, even when the curriculum coordinator raises an eyebrow at my unorthodox teaching methods. Who cares? My students are engaged, and at the end of the day, isn't that what truly matters? Well, that, and having an outlet for the chaotic narratives that have been bubbling in my mind since I was a kid. As the final bell rings, I'm packing up my books when Amanda, who teaches creative writing next door, leans against the doorframe, a smirk playing on her lips that can only mean one thing: gossip. "So, are you all prepped and ready for the annual monster-in-law invasion?" she asks, crossing her arms. I roll my eyes so hard, I practically give myself a tour of my own skull. "She gets here tomorrow, and she's staying for 2 weeks, Amanda." 14 days of passive-aggressive comments about the way I organize Ryan's sock drawer. Amanda steps closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Why don't you get one of those fake Campbell's soup can safes? You know, to hide your journal? I swear, that woman probably goes through your things the second you leave the apartment." A laugh bubbles up, but it dies in my throat, replaced by a sudden, icy dread. Could she? No, Eleanor is nosy, but she wouldn't go that far. Would she? And why on earth hadn't I ever considered that? My journal is just sitting there, in the second drawer of my desk, practically sending out a written invitation to be read. And you think your mother-in-law is a piece of work? You haven't heard anything yet. Let me tell you what happened the moment Eleanor arrived. Eleanor arrived at precisely 2:32 p.m., not a minute sooner or later. "Carol, darling, it's been too long," she chirped, pulling me into a hug that felt more like a territorial claim and planting 2 loud theatrical kisses on my cheeks, leaving behind the ghost of her crimson-red lipstick. That lipstick has a life of its own, imprinting itself on glasses, napkins, and, apparently, daughters-in-law. Ryan was beaming like a teenager who just got the latest gaming console, pure joy radiating from him. "Mom, look what Carol got for you," he said, handing her the artisanal lavender soap I'd picked out, specifically because I knew she despised the scent of lavender. "You have to take the small victories where you can get them." Eleanor held the soap as if it were a live grenade. "Oh, how artisanal. I'll save it for a special occasion." Translation: it's destined for the regift pile in her closet or a donation to her church's annual bake sale. It didn't take 20 minutes for the campaign to begin. Wouldn't this lovely photo of my Ryan just pop if the light from the window hit it differently? She suggested, already moving the frame before I could answer. Next were the books on the shelf. So much dust. The way I folded the bath towels. This method creates a crease right in the middle, and even the arrangement of pots in the kitchen. It's far more efficient to organize by size, not by how often you use them. How can one person harbor such passionate opinions about pots and pans? When I finally escaped for a moment alone, I went straight to our bedroom, locking the door with the excuse that I had to finish up some grading. I pulled open my desk drawer and... wait. I am absolutely certain I left my journal resting against the left side of the drawer with my pen marking my last entry. Now, it was dead center, perfectly squared with the edges of the drawer. The pen wasn't marking my page. It was lying on top of the closed cover like a verdict. My blood ran cold. Someone had been in my drawer. And there was only one person it could have been. someone with perfectly manicured crimson-red nails to match her lipstick. You know that primal feeling, that gut instinct that tells you someone has been in your space? I was about to find the smoking gun. So I decided that the priestess of the Redwood Coven would be the protagonist's ancestor, which would explain her clairvoyant abilities and her deep connection to the blood-forged dagger, the artifact that... My writing was cut short by a knock on the door. I snapped the journal shut, a wave of irrational guilt washing over me. That feeling you get when you're doing something perfectly innocent but don't want to be caught. "Just a second," I called out, shoving the diary under a stack of actual student essays. Ryan peeked his head in, flashing the same smile that still makes my heart do a little flip, even after 3 years of marriage. "Honey, Mom made that famous chocolate fudge cake you love." Eleanor materialized behind him like an apparition, her inquisitive eyes scanning every corner of the room. "It must be so enlightening grading papers. What are the youth of today even thinking about?" she asked, with a tone that really meant, "I bet they don't learn anything useful from you." After they left, I retrieved my journal again, but something caught my eye. There, on the corner of the page where I'd been describing the Redwood Coven's ritual, was a faint, reddish smear, no bigger than a fingerprint. I held it up to the lamplight. The scent was unmistakable. Lipstick, crimson red, the same shade that now stained her coffee mug, a dinner napkin, and my secret diary. My breath caught in my throat. Was she really reading my stories? Were my most private, unhinged fantasies being scrutinized by her critical, judgmental eyes? The next morning, I rushed to tell Amanda during our coffee break. "She tried to wipe it off, Amanda, but she missed a spot." "Who wipes a smudge from a place they were never supposed to be?" I exclaimed, nearly sloshing my latte. Amanda's eyes went wide. "That's a full-blown invasion of privacy. You have to call her out." But the mere thought of confrontation made my stomach twist into a knot. Confrontation is really not my strong suit. So, as Amanda was busy suggesting interrogation techniques that sounded straight out of a CIA handbook, a completely different kind of idea began to bloom in my mind. It was a scheme so wonderfully devious, I'm pretty sure it would have earned a nod of approval from Shonda Rhimes herself. You know that lightning bolt moment when a brilliant plan strikes and you just know it's going to work? Yeah, spoiler alert, it doesn't always go according to plan. And that, class, is how we identify an unreliable narrator in literature. They're telling a story, but as savvy readers, we can sense that something is deeply wrong. On the whiteboard, I listed the key giveaways: contradictions, questionable motives, inconsistencies in their tale. And right then, it hit me like a sudden summer storm. That was it. If Eleanor was so desperate to read my journal, then I would give her something truly spectacular to read. I'd give her a story that would make her think twice before ever sticking her nose in my business again. That evening, I sat at my desk, buzzing with a newfound creative energy. I flipped to the next blank page in my journal and began. Tonight, Master Anu contacted me again through the dream realm. He informed me that I am finally ready to ascend to the next level of the Sisterhood of the Silver Moon. I had to bite my lip to stifle a giggle. I spun a tale about a secret spiritual retreat I attended in the Catskills, where I was learning ancient rituals of energetic purification and ancestral communion. I wove in details about rare herbs, moon-drenched dances, and chanting in forgotten tongues. The words just poured out of me, a perfect cocktail of every fantasy novel I'd ever loved, and invented rituals that sounded just creepy enough to be plausible. The Master says that when my children are born, they will be sacred vessels, destined to carry the wisdom of the ancients. I reread the line and, for good measure, added, Ryan wouldn't be able to comprehend this yet. His soul needs to be gently prepared to accept the path. It was the perfect touch of dramatic flair. Just as I was silently congratulating myself, Ryan walked into the room. "What's so funny?" he asked, a curious smile on his face. I snapped the journal shut like a teenager caught with a forbidden magazine. "Oh, nothing. Just a student's essay that argued Jay Gatsby was the original toxic situationship influencer, all based on a TikTok trend." Ryan chuckled, kissed the top of my head, and went to take a shower. Meanwhile, I placed my journal back in the drawer with deliberate care, leaving it in plain sight, easily accessible. a perfectly baited trap, just waiting for its victim. I could hardly wait to see Eleanor's face at breakfast. Now comes the fun part, watching my little literary experiment unfold. Or at least, I thought it was going to be fun. I woke up the next morning with the giddy anticipation of someone who's just set up an elaborate prank. You know that feeling, right after you've balanced a bucket of water over a doorway? It was that kind of childish excitement. I slipped on my floral robe, the one Eleanor finds unbecoming for a married woman, as if I'm supposed to wear a floor-length flannel nightgown now that I'm hitched, and headed to the kitchen, ready to give an Oscar-worthy performance of nonchalance. "Good morning, dear." Eleanor's voice was entirely too cheerful, the kind of chipper tone that's definitely hiding something. She was dressed in her family visit uniform, impeccably pressed linen pants, and a silk blouse without a single crease. How does a person look like they just walked out of a catalog at 7:30 a.m.? "Did you sleep well?" "No. Nightmares?" She placed a strange emphasis on that last word, staring at me intently as she stirred her coffee. I had to physically bite my cheek to keep a smirk from breaking free. It worked. She'd swallowed the bait, hook, line, and sinker. "Oh, I slept wonderfully, thank you. I had some very illuminating dreams." I grabbed a piece of toast and began to spread jam on it with painstaking calm, as if I hadn't just implied I'd been chatting with interdimensional beings in my sleep. From the corner of my eye, I saw Eleanor nearly choke on her coffee. Ryan, completely oblivious to the thick tension in the air, was rambling about the traffic he was going to hit on the BQE. Are men from a different planet entirely? I'll confess, I was enjoying this far more than I probably should have, if only I had known where this little game was about to lead. Can you believe Eleanor actually asked me if I was interested in alternative faiths? I told Amanda, as we were grabbing bagels at the deli near school. I started talking about cosmic energies, and she turned white as a ghost. I thought she was going to choke on her everything bagel. Amanda laughed so hard, she nearly spilled her iced coffee all over her new shirt. That night, I decided to up the ante. My new diary entry described a full moon ceremony, where I supposedly danced around a bonfire in robes purified with Appalachian herbs. I added that the future children of light would need to be presented to the 4 elements before their first month on Earth, and that negative influences, read meddling mothers-in-law, could contaminate the sacred children's spiritual development. When Ryan got home from work, Eleanor was watching a cooking show on TV with the laser focus of someone defusing a bomb. She barely grunted a reply when I asked if she wanted more iced tea. Throughout dinner, she kept watching me, as if at any moment I might start levitating or speaking in tongues. "Carol, have you always had a fondness for black candles? I noticed a few in your sock drawer." The candles I'd bought for a surprise romantic dinner for Ryan. How did she even find them in my sock drawer? When you craft a story that's a little too convincing, it can start to take on a life of its own. And trust me, mine was just beginning to sharpen its claws. On Sunday, while Ryan was outside washing his car, I overheard Eleanor speaking in hushed tones on the phone in the guest room. "Yes, Marlene, I'm just so worried. She's writing these bizarre things, rituals involving children. No, he has no idea. I'm afraid for my future grandchildren." I leaned against the wall, a strange cocktail of guilt and vindication swirling in my stomach. It felt like telling a tiny white lie that suddenly snowballs into an avalanche. One part of me wanted to burst in and scream, "It's all fake, you snoop!" But the other part couldn't help but think, that's what you get for reading my private thoughts. On Wednesday, we all went to Trader Joe's. While I was picking out tomatoes for the sauce I was making that night, Eleanor vanished down the aisle with the candles and incense. When I found her, she was staring at a package of black candles with the horrified expression of a mother who just discovered her teenager's drug stash. The moment she saw me, she dropped the package as if it had burned her hands. "Oh, I was just looking for a gift for my friend from my prayer group." Amanda's warning over lunch in the school cafeteria echoed in my head. "Carol, this could get really messy. What if she tells Ryan? What if she convinces him you're actually unstable?" I chewed on my sandwich, lost in thought. "Okay, I'll write just one more entry, the most insane one yet, and then I'm done. She's leaving next week anyway." But deep down, a tiny voice was screaming that maybe, just maybe, I'd already crossed a line. Eleanor was infuriating, yes, but she wasn't an evil person. Just a standard-issue mother-in-law who believed no woman was good enough for her precious son. You're probably thinking I should have quit while I was ahead. Trust me, the thought crossed my mind. But then, that night, I sat at my desk, determined to write my masterpiece of madness. My pen danced across the page. Master Anu has revealed the final preparatory ritual for welcoming the children of light. The infants must be taken to the sacred spring in the Catskills on the first full moon after their birth. There, they will be submerged 3 times in the waters, which have been purified with essences of jasmine and sandalwood. Afterward, they must remain in total silence for 3 days, listening only to the ancestral chants I have learned. I paused, wondering what else would absolutely terrify a traditional, church-going grandmother. Ah, of course. The children will first learn the language of the ancients, only learning English after their 7th year. This will ensure their minds are not corrupted by the limiting constructs of modern society. They must also be shielded from toxic familial energies that could interfere with their spiritual destiny. That ought to do it. That should be enough to make Eleanor's perfectly coiffed hair stand on end. I reread my work with a queasy mix of pride and anxiety. Was I pushing this too far? What if Ryan saw it? He'd know it was fiction, right? He knows me better than anyone. He knows the only entities I communicate with are the characters in the books on my nightstand. I closed the journal, resolving to stop. Amanda was right. This whole thing could blow up in my face. The next morning at breakfast, Eleanor was strangely calm. She seemed almost pleased. Ryan, darling, I was thinking we should have a big family lunch at our house on Sunday. The whole family. It's been so long since we all got together. She aimed a smile at me, but it didn't reach her eyes. It's so important to discuss certain family matters, don't you think, Carol? A chill snaked its way down my spine. That wasn't an invitation to lunch. It was a summons. And from the look in her eyes, I was going to be the main course. You know that sinking feeling when you realize you've gone way too far and there's no turning back? Welcome to Judgment Day Sunday. Sunday arrived faster than a Black Friday doorbuster sale. I woke up with a lead weight in my stomach. That feeling you get when you know you have to face something awful, like a final exam you didn't study for, or running into your ex while you're on a date. Ryan, of course, was oblivious and cheerful. "It'll be great to see everyone," he said. Men really have a unique talent for missing palpable family tension. We arrived at his brother Mark and sister-in-law Jessica's house at 12:30, and the street was already lined with more cars than a mall parking lot on Christmas Eve. "Wow, a full house," I commented, trying to keep the panic out of my voice. Eleanor had summoned the entire Miller clan, aunts, uncles, cousins, even Great-Aunt Patty, who usually only shows up for funerals because she can't stand crowds. The moment we walked in, every conversation stopped. All eyes turned to me, as if I had just crash-landed a UFO on their manicured lawn. "Carol, so glad you could make it," Eleanor said, giving me her customary 2-cheek kiss, leaving the usual lipstick residue. Her voice was venomously sweet, reminding me of a narrator on a nature documentary right before the lion pounces. Jessica handed me a mimosa, her eyes wide with a look that screamed, "What on earth is going on?" As she passed me the glass, she whispered, "I was so surprised she called this get-together. Your mother-in-law seemed strangely determined." I swallowed hard and took a generous gulp of the drink. I was going to need a lot more than one of these to survive the afternoon. If you think a regular family get-together is tense, try one where everyone thinks you're the leader of a secret cult. The disaster struck right around the time the burgers came off the grill. Uncle Frank, in the middle of a heated discussion about football, always a terrible idea at family gatherings, turned to me and boomed, "So, Carol, is it true you believe children should drink special herbal teas to cleanse their souls?" I choked on my potato salad, sputtering water all over my new dress. The entire patio went silent. How? Where did he even get that from? I shot a look at Eleanor, who was innocently arranging her coleslaw, as if she hadn't spent the last 2 weeks poisoning the family well. "Uncle Frank, I have no idea what you're talking about." I tried to sound baffled, but my voice came out as a high-pitched squeak. Ryan's brow furrowed. "Mom, what is this about?" Eleanor placed her fork down with dramatic slowness. Well, son, I didn't want to worry you, but I've been seeing some very disturbing things. I'm just concerned about my future grandchildren. And just like that, the dam broke. Everyone started talking at once. Aunt Patty muttered something about pagan nonsense. A cousin named Phil asked if I could speak to ghosts. And Grandma Miller made the sign of the cross 3 times while staring directly at me. The fallout from that disastrous BBQ simmered for months, with whispered phone calls and suspicious looks, until it finally exploded at Christmas. We were at my parents' house for our traditional holiday dinner, complete with my mom's turkey that's always just a little bit too dry, though no one ever has the heart to say so. Eleanor arrived late, which was unheard of. The woman is usually so punctual she makes a Swiss watch look sloppy. Her eyes were red-rimmed, and her normally impeccable hair looked like it had survived a hurricane. I thought the worst was over. But apparently, the universe looked at my situation and thought, "You know what this needs? More drama." "Ryan!" she exclaimed, storming past my parents and their greetings. "We need to talk. Now!" My poor father froze, a forkful of honey-baked ham suspended in midair, while my mother whispered something about respecting the holiday. Eleanor opened her handbag, her favorite Michael Kors tote she saves for special occasions, and pulled out a sheaf of papers. My stomach dropped to the floor when I recognized the handwriting. They were photocopies of my diary. "Look at what your wife has been writing. She's planning to take our grandchildren to midnight rituals at a lake. She wants to sacrifice chickens in the backyard." Sacrifice chickens? Chickens? I had never, not once, written a single word about sacrificing animals. The living room went utterly still. My younger sister dropped her glass of eggnog on the rug, the good one my mom only puts out for special occasions. My dad, ever the peacekeeper, just numbly offered the plate of Christmas cookies to no one in particular. Ryan took the pages from her, his face cycling through a kaleidoscope of emotions before landing on a ghostly, concerning shade of white. His eyes, full of a deep, wounded confusion, met mine. Later that night, after a car ride home wrapped in a silence so thick you could have sliced it with a knife, I found him in his home office. My journal was open on the desk in front of him. "Carol, what is this?" His voice was small, almost childlike. How was I supposed to begin to explain that this entire nightmare was born from a stupid, petty prank against his meddling mother? "Ryan, do you honestly believe I would sacrifice chickens on our fire escape? We don't even have a fire escape." It was the only defense I could muster, and even to my own ears, it sounded pathetically weak. Have you ever had your entire family, the people who are supposed to love you unconditionally, look at you and question your sanity? Let me tell you, it's not nearly as fun as it looks in the movies. The days that followed felt like living inside a bad reality TV show, the kind filled with manufactured drama and tearful confessions. Ryan was caught in a painful limbo, torn between his gut feeling that I wasn't running a secret cult, thank you Ryan, and the very reasonable question of why on earth I would write pages upon pages of detailed fiction about it, a fair point. My own family was split. My mom was drowning in genuine hand-wringing concern, while my younger sister, who has always had a warped sense of humor, found the whole situation absolutely hysterical. On the Miller side, things were far more grim. Great-Aunt Patty was convinced I needed the Lord's intervention, while Uncle Frank had seriously suggested a full-on intervention with their pastor. Mark, Ryan's ever-so-helpful brother, was certain I needed urgent psychiatric evaluation. The single ray of light in this whole mess came from Jessica, my sister-in-law, who called me late one night, her voice a conspiratorial whisper. "Carol, I know this is all Eleanor being her usual dramatic self. Anyone who can get teenagers excited about The Great Gatsby can't be evil. And honestly, it's about time someone finally got one over on her." Ryan had relocated to the sofa. "To think," he said. But every time our eyes met across the apartment, I saw the same agonizing question reflected in them. "Who are you?" I tried, repeatedly, to explain that it was all an elaborate story meant to teach his snooping mother a lesson, but how could I prove it? The evidence was all there, in my own handwriting, with details so specific that only a true believer would know them. Or, anyone who spent their adolescence devouring fantasy novels. Then, one particularly bleak afternoon, as I sat on our bed staring at the ceiling and wondering how my life had turned into some rejected script for a sitcom, I pulled out my real journal, the one hidden under a shoebox in the back of my closet. I started writing everything down: how I found out about Eleanor, the creation of the fake stories, and how it had all spun so horribly out of control. It was like therapy, but with a pen and paper. "Dear Diary," I wrote, "how did an English teacher manage to write a piece of fiction so convincing that it completely shattered her own reality? And just when I thought things couldn't possibly get any more complicated, the universe decided to throw me another curveball. They say when it rains, it pours. But what do they say about a life-altering surprise arriving in the middle of a 5-alarm fire? On Thursday morning, exactly 3 days after the Christmas catastrophe, I woke up with that all-too-familiar lurch in my stomach. I sprinted to the bathroom, and after offering up the remains of last night's Christmas ham to the porcelain god, I found myself staring at my pale, haggard reflection. Wait a second. What's today's date? I grabbed my phone. The 28th. 28. Why is that date ringing a bell? Oh my God. I was late. Not late for a meeting late, but Aunt Flo is officially MIA late. I sank onto the toilet lid, my legs suddenly feeling like overcooked spaghetti. This can't be happening. Not now. But it could, and my body had been sending subtle signals that, in my existential crisis over being branded a cult leader by my in-laws, I had conveniently ignored. I pulled on the first sweatshirt I could find, my old paint-stained NYU one, and bolted to the CVS on the corner. I didn't buy one pregnancy test. I bought 3 different brands. You know, for statistical accuracy. I was definitely not panicking. The cashier gave me that little knowing smile, the one that says, "I know exactly what's going on here." I raced back home, thanking every deity in the cosmos that Ryan had left for work early and Eleanor was at morning mass, undoubtedly praying for my wayward soul. 20 minutes and 3 little plastic sticks later, I was sitting on the bathroom floor, staring at the undeniable results. Positive, positive, and, just to be sure, positive. I, Carol Miller, high school English teacher, alleged pagan cult leader, and current family pariah, was pregnant. The future grandchild, who was to be indoctrinated into ancestral rituals, was, at this very moment, a tiny, growing reality inside of me. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry, so I did both at the same time, which probably made me look completely unhinged. And let's be honest, would only serve to prove Great Aunt Patty's theory. It's incredible how a tiny piece of plastic can turn your entire world upside down, isn't it? But now, I had to fix this mess. I'm pregnant. My husband's family thinks I'm a cult leader, and he's barely even looking at me. I confessed to Amanda during our lunch break, huddled in the teacher's lounge so no one could overhear. My friend choked on her coffee, looking at me with an expression that screamed, "You have got to be kidding me." When she realized I wasn't, her eyes went so wide they looked like they might pop out of her head. "Carol, that is, wow. What are you going to do?" It was the million-dollar question. What was I going to do? My life had become a ridiculously over-the-top Lifetime movie. But I knew one thing for sure. I had to clean up this disaster. For me, for Ryan, and now, for the little bean growing inside me. I made my decision right then and there, somewhere between a sip of chamomile tea, since coffee was now off the table, and a deep, steadying breath. It was time for the truth. All of it. That night, I made Ryan's favorite dinner, my special chicken parmesan, with a sauce that calls for a splash of red wine. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was cooking with wine I couldn't even taste. I set the table with the good crystal glasses from our wedding registry that we never used, lit some candles, white ones of course, no need to traumatize the poor man further, and put on some Sam Cooke for background music. When Ryan came home, he stopped in the doorway, looking completely bewildered by the scene. "Is it a special occasion I forgot about?" he asked, his voice laced with caution. I took a deep breath. "We need to talk. About everything." I had finally told Ryan everything, but that was only half the battle. The hardest part was yet to come, facing Eleanor. The conversation lasted for what felt like an eternity. 3 hours, 2 boxes of tissues, and an entire pot of decaf coffee. I laid it all out for him, finding the lipstick smudges in my journal, my ill-conceived plan to teach her a lesson, and the way the lie had grown into an uncontrollable monster. Ryan's expression shifted through every possible stage on the emotional spectrum, from stunned disbelief to righteous anger. She was actually reading your private journal, to a reluctant, weary understanding. Finally, a sigh of relief so profound it seemed to come from the depths of his soul escaped him. "So, you don't actually believe our children need to be baptized in a moonlit lake?" he asked, a faint, exhausted smile finally appearing. I rolled my eyes. I was thinking the bathtub would be more practical. You know, fewer mosquitoes. For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, we laughed together, that shaky, ragged laugh of two people who have just survived a Category 5 hurricane. But then the laughter died and the real question hung in the air: what now? "I have to tell your mother the truth," I said, the words tasting like ash. "But I have no idea how to even start." Right on cue, my phone buzzed. It was Jessica, my sister-in-law, and as of that moment, my favorite person in the Miller clan. "Carol, listen, I know this is going to sound crazy," she whispered, "but do you want to finally put Eleanor in her place, once and for all?" It turned out that a decade of dealing with her perfect mother-in-law had left Jessica more than ready for a little revolution. "I'm in. Mark's out of town on business, so it's just me and her at the house. Come over for coffee tomorrow. We'll figure this out." The next day, the three of us, me, Ryan, and Jessica, sat around her kitchen island and hatched what we dubbed Operation Sanity Rescue. The plan was both simple and terrifying, a family dinner where I would lay the truth on the table, but on my terms. "We have to play this perfectly," Jessica warned, "or she'll find a way to twist this and make herself the victim." Ryan fidgeted with his coffee mug, clearly torn between loyalty to his mother and the undeniable fact that she had crossed a line no one should ever cross. "And there's one more thing," I added, sharing a look with my husband. "A piece of news that's going to change everything. I never thought I'd be plotting against my mother-in-law with her own daughter-in-law. But as they say, desperate times call for desperate measures." On Saturday night, our apartment was spotless, the table was set, and I was wearing my navy blue J. Crew dress that Eleanor had complimented once. I needed every advantage I could get. Ryan was so on edge, he had checked the temperature of the Cabernet 3 times, which was ironic, considering I, the only sober person in attendance, was the one who needed a drink the most. Jessica arrived first, carrying a key lime pie to sweeten the mood. Mark showed up next, looking profoundly uncomfortable, and finally, Eleanor made her grand entrance, punctual as ever. "What a lovely surprise dinner," she commented, her eyes sweeping the room as if searching for hidden cameras or sacrificial altars. Her gaze paused on the centerpiece of flowers. "Lilies! An interesting choice." I bit my tongue to stop myself from retorting that yes, they were lilies, not herbs for summoning ancient spirits. Instead, I smiled and offered her a glass of champagne, and for myself, sparkling cider in a matching flute. After the appetizer, a baked brie with fig jam that, miraculously, drew no criticism about my choice of serving platter, I took a deep breath. It was showtime. "Eleanor, I have a confession to make." The room went still. Ryan squeezed my hand under the table. "I discovered a while ago that you've been reading my private journal during your visits." Her face cycled through several shades of crimson, finally settling on a hue that perfectly matched her lipstick. "I would never," she began, but I held up a hand, stopping her gently. "Please, just let me finish." I explained it all. The lipstick smudge, the moved journal, the profound sense of violation I felt. "So, instead of confronting you directly, I decided to give you something more interesting to read." I saw the flicker of recognition in her eyes, followed by a wave of confusion. "That was all a lie?" I nodded. "Every last word. I'm an English teacher, Eleanor. Making up stories is literally my job." The silence that followed was so heavy you could feel it pressing down. Jessica was the first to break it, letting out a bark of laughter she'd clearly been holding back for weeks. Mark looked torn between shock and a strange sort of reluctant admiration. Ryan just squeezed my hand tighter, his thumb tracing soothing circles on my skin. "Why didn't you just say something?" Eleanor finally asked, her voice small, stripped of all its usual authority. It was a fair question. Why hadn't I? Because I was scared, I admitted, the honesty of the words surprising even me. I was scared of creating more tension, of hurting Ryan, of never being accepted by his family. But I realize now that the lies only made everything worse. I hesitated, glancing at Ryan, who gave me an encouraging nod. And now, more than ever, we need to be honest with each other. Because I reached for the envelope I had placed on the sideboard and handed it to her. Your grandson or granddaughter will be arriving in about 7 months. And no, they will not be baptized in a moonlit lake. After I dropped that bomb, the silence was deafening. What happened next? Well, you might want to sit down for this. To say the pregnancy announcement caused an emotional earthquake would be the understatement of the year. Eleanor was frozen, the envelope with the ultrasound picture trembling in her hand like a leaf in a storm. Her eyes, usually as sharp as surgical steel, were glistening with unshed tears. "A baby?" she whispered, her voice cracking in a way I never thought possible. What happened next was even more shocking. She stood up. I fully expected her to storm out. But instead, she walked over to me and hugged me. It wasn't one of her usual stiff-armed hugs with awkward pats on the back. It was a real, soul-deep embrace. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, a phrase I was convinced wasn't in her vocabulary. I was just trying to protect my son, but I went too far. I crossed every line. In the weeks that followed, our family began what I can only describe as a total renovation. It was like one of those shows on HGTV where they have to tear everything down to the studs before they can build something new and better. Ryan finally started setting firm boundaries with his mother, something he probably should have done years ago. But hey, better late than never. "Mom, we love you, but you can't just reorganize our kitchen cabinets without asking, and, Mom, I appreciate your concern, but Carol and I will be the ones making the decisions about the baby's upbringing." The most incredible part was that Eleanor was changing. It wasn't some dramatic overnight transformation, of course. A leopard doesn't change its spots. But now, when she had a suggestion, which was really just a thinly veiled command, she would ask first. "Would you two mind if I organize these drawers? They're a bit of a disaster." And in what felt like a miracle of biblical proportions, if we said no, she would actually stop. As for me, I was learning that avoiding conflict only ever creates a bigger one down the road. Sometimes a simple, "I'd rather you didn't go through my things," can prevent a drama worthy of an Emmy. Who would have thought a baby on the way would be the peace treaty we all needed? But of course, peace doesn't mean the absence of a few battles. Mint green or pastel yellow? Eleanor held up 2 paint swatches, her expression dead serious, as if we were selecting our child's future college major, not just the color of their nursery walls. We were standing in the room that would soon be transformed. Until now, it had been a home office/repository for all the junk that didn't fit anywhere else. "What about this light blue?" I suggested, pointing to a third option. She wrinkled her nose. "Too cold. A baby needs warmth." And so began another round of what Ryan had affectionately dubbed the Great Nursery Debates. Except, this time, it wasn't really a battle. It was more of a spirited discussion between 2 very stubborn women who were, surprisingly, beginning to find common ground. "What if we did a classic fairy tale theme?" I offered, knowing it would appeal to her traditional side. Her eyes lit up. "Like Sleeping Beauty? Or Cinderella?" Over the next few weeks, we created a nursery that was a perfect blend of my wild imagination and Eleanor's practicality. We painted a sprawling mural of an enchanted forest with characters from classic stories. I would sketch the outlines, and she would fill them in with a steady, precise hand that I had to admit was impressive. Ryan would watch us from the doorway with a goofy grin, likely convinced he had stumbled into an alternate dimension where his wife and his mother were not just tolerating each other, but actively collaborating. "You know," Eleanor said one afternoon as we were sticking glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling, "when Ryan was a baby, I used to sing to him every night. Old songs my grandmother taught me." She paused, her paintbrush hovering in midair. "I could teach them to you, if you'd like." I stopped what I was doing, genuinely touched. It was the first time she had ever offered to share a piece of herself with me, not as an order, but as a gift. I'd love that, I said, and I meant it. Because in the end, we weren't just putting a room together, we were building a bridge across generations. Decorating a nursery with your mother-in-law can be a test of supreme patience or a chance to connect. In our case, it was complicatedly both. "Ryan Miller, don't you ever touch me again," I screamed as another contraction ripped through me. Whoever said childbirth is a beautiful, magical experience was clearly a man. Ryan, pale as a ghost, was clutching my hand and trying to soothe me with encouraging phrases he'd obviously memorized from some Dad's Guide to the Delivery Room pamphlet. "You're doing great, honey. Just breathe." Out in the waiting room, the entire Miller clan had set up a base camp. My parents, my sister, Mark and Jessica, aunts, uncles, cousins, and of course, Eleanor, who, according to one of the nurses, had already reorganized the magazine rack by genre and suggested a more efficient system for calling in family members. Some things never change. And honestly, in between contractions that felt like my spine was being split in two, there was something oddly comforting in her predictability. 16 hours, yes, 16, and a string of profanities I will never repeat in front of this child later, Sophia Miller came into the world, tiny, red, and possessing a set of lungs surprisingly powerful for someone so small. When the nurse placed her in my arms, all the pain, all the drama of the past 9 months, it all just melted away. There was only her little eyes trying to focus on this big, scary new world. "Hi, little one," I whispered. "Welcome. I promise I won't ever dip you in a moonlit lake." The first visitor after we were settled was, surprisingly, the most peaceful. Eleanor came into the room alone, without her usual committee of critics. She was wearing a new soft blue sweater. I found out later she bought it specifically for the occasion, and she was carrying a small, wrapped gift. May I hold her?" she asked, with a hesitation I had never seen in her before. I nodded, and with practiced, gentle movements, she took Sophia into her arms. "Hello, princess," she murmured, her voice softer and more vulnerable than I had ever heard it. "I'm your grandma." Our eyes met over the little bundle of blankets, and in that single, silent moment, we sealed a truce that no diary, real or fake, could ever break. After pushing a human being out of your body, dealing with a meddling mother-in-law seems almost easy. Almost. And so the princess discovered that the real magic was inside her all along, I read, turning the page of the picture book as Sophia, now a full 12 months old, clapped her chubby little hands in approval. We were in the living room during her first birthday party, which was decorated with an enchanted forest theme, a joint effort between my imagination and Eleanor's organizational genius. "She has your creativity," Eleanor commented, now officially Grandma Ellie. Sophia couldn't quite manage Eleanor, and the nickname stuck. She was holding a digital camera, documenting every moment like an official royal photographer. "And her father's stubbornness," I added, watching Sophia categorically refuse a spoon and dive hand first into her birthday cupcake. Ryan walked over with 2 glasses of champagne, handing one to me. "To our little hurricane," he toasted, gazing adoringly at our daughter, who was now sporting an impressive frosting beard. "And to peace in the family." I clinked my glass against his, looking around the room at the Millers and my family, all coexisting in a state of happy chaos, or the closest any family ever gets to it. Later that night, after the guests had gone and Sophia had finally surrendered to sleep, after lodging a loud formal protest against this basic biological need, I found Ryan in the home office, holding my new journal. My heart did a familiar leap of panic, flashbacks of the drama replaying in my mind. But he just smiled and placed it back in the drawer. "Don't worry, I didn't read it. I think I've learned my lesson about privacy." He paused for dramatic effect. "Besides, my mom already told me everything you wrote there." I laughed and swatted his arm playfully. "Very funny." I opened the journal to the last entry and showed it to him. "Actually, I'm writing a story. A true story. About a literature teacher with a runaway imagination, a mother-in-law who learned to knock, and the little girl who finally taught them how to write a happy ending together. A well-meaning mother-in-law who couldn't help but meddle, and how a ridiculous feud almost blew up a family before ultimately saving it. Ryan pulled me in, wrapping his arm around my shoulders. Sounds like one hell of a story. How does it end? I closed the journal, a real smile spreading across my face. That part isn't written yet. I think we're living it right now. From the nursery down the hall, we could hear Sophia making little whimpering sounds in her sleep, probably dreaming of more frosting. In the kitchen, the dishwasher hummed softly, a testament to Eleanor's insistence on helping with the dishes before she left. I was 99% sure she'd also resorted the silverware drawer according to her own system. And here we were, the two of us, finally at peace in the beautiful, chaotic storm of a life we had made. People say that books are a safe escape from the real world, but I learned that sometimes you have to live through a wild, unbelievable story to find the kind of happy ending you never knew you were looking for. And the best part is, our story is far from over. There are countless chapters still to come, full of unexpected plot twists and new characters. And I have a feeling it's going to be a blockbuster.